First, the bronze sponsor, Honorable Cynthia McKinnon. Now our silver sponsors, Lynn and David Berelsman. The voting voices, Michelle Levy, Lori and Richard Wack, Charlie Williams, Carolyn Emmons Schramm. The Kindred Three, Joan Irwin, Sue Foreman, and Lee Rambo Kemp. And Friends of the League, Honorable Fred Lawton and Shelley Lawton, Honorable Bob LeBlanc and Joni LeBlanc, and Dr. Gloria Picard. And now we'd like to thank our visionary sponsor, Jennifer and Phil Anderson. Please give all our sponsors a round of applause. Would all our sponsors that are here please stand up and be recognized? Again, thank you to all of you. Now we'd like to talk briefly about our May match campaign. Sorry. Once again, our visionary sponsors, Phil and Jennifer Anderson, generously agreed to match every dollar donated up to $25,000 for our May summer match campaign. Thank you, Phil and Jennifer. As the midterms approach, help us do all we can to educate, empower, and get voters to the polls. Donation envelopes and the QR code can be found on all of the tables. Thank you for that. Now, we're talking about our program. The Florida Legislature and the governor have approved laws in recent years that have made it harder to register, to vote, and to make changes to the state constitution. And more changes will come after January 1st, when the new ID voter law goes into effect. For a pro-voting group like ours, this is very bad news. But I want to take heart. There is a critical election this year, and we can and we will make a difference. We will work twice as hard. We will sleep less, even less than we're doing now. Keep in mind that some of these laws are still being challenged in court. We might be surprised, or we might not. Who knows at this point? But we will continue to fight for the right to vote. It's what we do. And democracy is worth fighting for. And now I want to introduce our moderator, although he is very well known to many of you. Bill Cowles retired as Orange County Elections Supervisor after 34 years of heading local elections. Please give a warm welcome to Bill.
Thank you, Kathy. And I am really glad to have the opportunity to participate in today's hot topic luncheon. It's great to see old friends, familiar people, faces, and the warm welcome that I've received so far. This is quite a different role for me. Being the moderator, I questioned it when they called and asked if I would do that. And then they told me who the panel would be, and I just said, well, I'm not sure that, is it good for the past and the present to meet like this? For that, but it is a privilege to be here and participate in this. I'm the stress-free one, not the others, on that. But over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with all three of our panel members. And so let me take this opportunity to introduce them properly. It's my honor to introduce, and listen carefully, I'm introducing my elected replacement. Karen Castor-Dental, your Orange County Supervisor of Elections. Karen was elected supervisor on November 5th, 2024, a lifelong Floridian and dedicated public servant. She spent over 25 years serving Orange County as public school teacher, state legislator, and school board member. I want to share a quick fact with you. This is a historical year for Orange County and the Supervisor of Elections Office. They're involved in 2 redistricting issues. Redistricting usually only happens at the end of a decade. And in my years, I only had to deal with 4 redistricting, but she has now completed 2 in her first 18 months in office. Welcome, Karen. Next, it's my honor to introduce Aubrey Jewett. Aubrey is an internationally recognized expert in American and Florida politics and is currently the Associate Director and Associate Professor in the School of Politics, Security, and International Affairs at the University of Central Florida. Aubrey is the co-founder of the Lou Fry Institute of Politics and Government, which has a primary mission on civic education. Welcome, Aubrey. Our third panelist is Ricardo Negra Almodovar. Ricardo is the Florida Senior Campaign Manager for All Voting is Local and a multi-state nonpartisan voting rights organization. He's also the co-founder of the Del Ambarita, an organization to promote holistic development of Spanish-speaking LGBTQIA plus communities in Florida. Welcome, Ricardo. So let's get right to it. The first question is for Karen, and obviously is on redistricting, but we're going to start with the Board of County Commissioners redistricting. As you know, the voters voted to add 2 county commission seats, and then she's got the mid-decade congressional map about shortly. Can you share with us what your office has gone through, achieved, and where we stand with the BCC county redistricting, which, interesting enough, those who were at the mic know it. For some, qualifying starts in 26 days from today. Are you ready?
Yes. All right, well, thank you, Bill, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. I will first let you all know that no matter what comes our way in our office, that I inherited a superb staff. So thank you very much, and we will do whatever it takes to meet our deadlines. We may be exhausted and dragging, but we will get it done. So if I can first talk about the process that we went through with the county. It was a bipartisan committee. It lasted about a year, and my office was able to kind of work with the appointed committee that went through the redistricting, and we kind of advised them on, the districts and how to match up the lines of the county and the precincts. And it was a deliberative process. It was transparent. There was public comment and notice of meetings. There were several maps that were offered by community members, and the public would come and speak on the pros and cons of the different configurations. And they followed fair district standards. They kept communities intact, and they kept the districts compact. And it really helped, I believe, with different communities, such as the Pine Hills community, which in the past has been divided and often wasn't served well by their elected officials. And now, when the Pine Hills community came up and said, no, we want to be a whole district, the public came out and the committee listened, and now there's a District 7 that incorporates all of Pine Hills, and we have 16 candidates for that position right now for District 7. So they are ready and eager to participate. And that was a fair process that was engaged And we are going to be ready for the congressional redistricting. It will be a tight timeline, but we'll get it done.
Great. Just out of curiosity, and I know there's a school board member here and some school board candidates, would it have been a lot? 7 districts? Former school board member?
Yes, so there are 7 school board districts. If we had just had 7 commission districts, we could have just used those same boundaries, and it would have been a lot easier for our office and ballot styles.
All right. So you may have heard last week there was a event at the Orange County Elections Office, and actually Ricardo was the moderator there. But we've heard recently in the news about vote-by-mail ballots and the drop by 1/3 of what they were in the 2024 election. What factors do you think have affected these numbers, and what can be done to increase them?
I'm glad you brought it up because we really need to make sure that we get the word out. So in 2024, we had 175,000 mail ballots that were sent out. And currently we have, for this upcoming election, 60,000 requests. And the reason is from Senate Bill 90, when they changed the law saying that everyone had to re-request every 2 years after every general election cycle. So all those 175,000 mail ballot requests expired, and everyone has to re-request. And I think everyone should, even if you don't plan to vote by mail. It's an insurance policy. We do have just under 3 months left to build those numbers up. And people do get more informed as an election comes, and we do see an increase. But we are going to be proactive in sending out mail and letting people know their vote-by-mail status. And they'll have QR codes and phone numbers to call. It's very easy to make that request. You can go online and make that request. And you can also make that request for anyone in your immediate family if you have their birth date and other information. We are also increasing our advertising and marketing for the election. We have a new partnership with Univision, and we'll continue with other media outlets, and we're increasing our own social media as well.
Very good. Very good. If you haven't done yours, here's your warning. All righty, moving on to Ricardo. What's the message for getting voters engaged this year? What does your organization see in terms of actual barriers to voting and or some misperceived problems?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. The first thing I want to say is that you have to support your local election officials who are working really hard to make sure that you can access the ballot box in your preferred method of voting and making sure that your vote is counted. Participate in public meetings. I'm sure the supervisor loves when we all show up to Logic and Accuracy, when we show up to canvassing board meetings and all the other many procedures that are there for us to go in, to actually get to see how things run in the office and to make sure that we can share that accurate information with our friends, with our families, with our networks. I understand that there is fear. I understand that there's also a lot of confusion because so many things are changing all at once with new laws, executive orders that are coming from the federal level. They're not enforceable right now. And there's also tons of partisan activities. We've spoken about how there's going to be laws changing some of the aspects of voter registration and the identifications that are accepted at the polls. But the important thing is that this law is not in play for 2026. So we cannot let misinformation about that deter us and our communities from voting. Vote by mail, as we mentioned, has suffered tremendously, but it's still a very favorable way of voting for all Floridians. We have to step up, do our part, make sure that we share the message. If you need to vote, if you want to vote by mail, you have to request it. And there's also the fact that our organizations have had to shift the way that we engage with voters, particularly on the voter registration component, because of the changes in laws, the penalties that we can face as third-party voter registration organizations. However, there's over 807,000 registered voters in Orange County as of this morning, and we all have options. Elections are happening. You need to start getting ready by yesterday. So it's very important to talk about the options that voters have. So who here votes by mail? Keep your hands up. Have you requested your vote by mail ballot? Okay, perfect. Let your family, your friends know that they have to. Who here votes early? Great, there's gonna be new more sites coming up. Actually, this is an early voting site, this library, and if my math is mathing correctly, the next hot topics in August might be during that time, so make a plan. And if you vote on election day, well, there's options, so don't wait until the last day. So I think that's my message. Do not wait until the last day of voting, because if you vote before election day, you can mitigate some of these changes and fears that there are going around.
Either Ricardo or Karen, two topics that have been coming up that I get people worried. One is about polling place safety. Will there be people outside from the federal government or elsewhere? And guns. Anyone?
I've heard that concern as well, and my concern really is about what if there isn't and other people stay home. So we are doing everything we can to increase the training of our poll. There have been no documented cases of harassment of our poll workers that I've known of. But we're going to make sure that they have enough information that they know how to respond to any issues that a voter might bring to them. And then we're going to be having conversations with all the municipal police departments and the sheriff department about what are the laws around voting, and within that 150-foot perimeter around the polling places. And then if there are people outside of that, we're relying on our election protection teams and coordination with community groups. So that is still in planning processes, but I know that there are trainings going on for people for that.
Yes, we're actively training volunteers of our community organizations who are going to be deployed outside polling locations so that they can monitor what's happening on the streets, and they can flag any instances of voter intimidation or presence of immigration law enforcement or anything else that could prevent people from accessing the polling site.
If I can add that it's important for everyone in here to have a plan to vote early, to vote by mail if you need to vote early. We, like Ricardo said, we do have additional sites, but that can help mitigate those fears of potential agents that are nearby. If you can vote before Election Day, then you can help people who are waiting till Election Day to vote.
All right, Aubrey, in the world of elections, you can't talk about elections without talking about lawsuits. The League of Women Voters of Florida are a party to 3 lawsuits challenging House Bill 991, the voter ID law, the mid-decade congressional redistricting, and petition law that was passed last year. From a historical perspective, how have we gotten to this point? Stay tuned. Listen.
Well, if we look at the history of the world, we'll start way back. Yes, part 1. Seriously, in the history of the world, people in power want to stay in power. And political parties that are in power want to stay in power. And on one level, there's nothing wrong with that. There's like a right way and a wrong way to do this, right? The right way is to come up with policies that address real problems that people have that they would like government to deal with. And if you come up with a better set of policies and get more votes, then you stay in power. But then the other way is to try to change and manipulate the rules so that your party or your individual has a better chance of staying in office. And that's, I think, that's what we have been seeing in the United States and in Florida. And how we got here specifically is that, thankfully, there are some groups like the League of Women Voters and the League of Women Voters of Orange County that are willing to stand up and say this is wrong and to file lawsuits. So that's, in the big broad sense, I think that's how we got here where we're at today, having chicken for lunch and enjoying each other's company. Looking at the three specific things, the voter ID, where did that come from? Really, a lot of that stems from President Trump and his insistence going back to 2020 that he didn't really lose the election and that the only reason he lost was because of massive fraud. There's very little substantial evidence of that. Almost none. Is there ever fraud in elections? Yeah, there's occasional here and there. People vote who aren't supposed to or something like that. We've had a couple of cases in Florida where people voted twice, once in Florida, once in another state. But it's a handful, not very many, and it hasn't really had any big impact that we can ever see as political scientists or journalists on actual election outcomes. But because he has, I shouldn't just use pronouns, because President Trump has repeated that assertion over and over again, it has become part and parcel of a lot of today's Republican Party. Some of it is because some people really still believe it and they believe Trump and they back it up. Others, Republicans, I think, do it because they don't want to go against the tide, because they know if they go against Trump, they are likely to get primaried. But that's, I think, why we're seeing the voter ID stuff. At the national level, it hasn't passed, but in Florida, we already had some voter ID, but now, they've made it even more difficult for certain people to vote, most likely. And here, again, another truism is if you put up hurdles and you make it harder to register and you make it harder to vote, you'll have less people doing those two things. And usually it has a disparate impact. Some people are more impacted than others. And so if you are someone like gets married and changes your last name, as a woman often does, or at least sometimes does, then that's going to make it difficult for you. If you're Hispanic and maybe sometimes you have 2 or 3 last names, as is sometimes a cultural custom, then that could be a problem. If you're a young person who's going to college and they tell you, I'm sorry, we won't take your college ID, but if you have a registered weapon permit from Florida, we will take that. So it is, again, that's the voter ID. And then real quickly, we're going to talk a lot more about congressional redistricting, but why are we there now? Because President Trump asked for it. He's trying to protect the Republican majority in Congress. He knows that the president's party usually loses seats in a midterm election, and unpopular presidents usually lose even more. He's pretty unpopular right now, so he asked Republican states to engage in midterm redistricting to try to protect his lead. And then which one did I skip? Let's see, voter ID, congressional redistricting, the petition law. So I'll stop there because the sign went up. But the petition law too, yeah. I think we're coming back to that in a moment.
Yes, and that's the next question, And it's going to go to Ricardo and to Aubrey, but we'll let Karen jump in. I've got a follow-up for her. State lawmakers have created barriers to the citizen-led state amendments. Amendments to the Florida Constitution now must pass by at least 60% of the vote, and signature gatherers are facing strict standards, and organizations are heavy fines, is making it more difficult to get amendments on the ballot. Are there any remedies? We'll start at the end with Ricardo. You come to Aubrey, and then I'll ask a follow-up question.
I was going to say that, Aubrey, you can go because you were on a roll. Please.
Okay. Well, he couldn't get enough of me, thank goodness. If we look at the restrictions that have been put on the constitutional amendments, where did that come from? Well, I think that directly comes from the fact that we had an abortion rights amendment and a recreational marijuana amendment that almost passed. They didn't quite get to 60%, but they almost passed. And again, a lot of conservative Republicans up in the legislature didn't like that. And more broadly, and again, this isn't just for Florida, I'm not just picking on the legislators here. Typically, if one party controls the legislature and the governor's office in a state, they don't want people going around them, right? They say, representative democracy, you vote for us, we make the rules. If you do an initiative petition, that is by design a way to go around an unresponsive legislature. And so generally speaking, legislatures don't like that. Well, in this case, specifically after those two things almost passed, I think the Republican legislature said we're going to do all we can to crack down. Yes, it's in the Florida Constitution that we have a right to doing the initiative petition, but all the details are left to us. And so if we make all sorts of rules about who gets to collect signatures and how those signatures can be collected and when you have to turn them in, and if there's any mistakes, there's draconian financial penalties. And then at a certain point, then you got to put like but you got to put down like $1 million bond so that you can pay fines just in case they come. It really makes it quite difficult to gather those signatures. Or, as we saw in the case of the recreational marijuana folks who tried again, then they start changing the rules right in the middle of when you're getting signatures to say that some of the things that you've already done that seemed to be legal before are now illegal, and then you can't collect those. So that seems to be where we're at. I am of the belief, having studied this now for more than 30 years, written a chapter on the Florida Constitution in my book, that Politics in Florida, that we have the power of initiative almost right now only in name, not in reality, unless you have access to $100 million, either raising it because it's a hot button issue like maybe abortion rights may come back, or because there's a vested financial interest like the recreational marijuana folks. They'll be back on that.
The cost itself has taken it away from the average person. It's a citizen-led initiative, but just the cost of signature verifications that went up because of all these added restrictions. The mailers that the elections office have to send now to a voter, letting them know, hey, we got this petition from you. Maybe see if you didn't actually sign it and report them.
So here we are with, there's no initiatives through the petition method going to the ballot this fall. But a quick question, Karen, is during the process and the strain on the staff to check these things is tremendous. And then talk about it just briefly. Secretary of State, their legal department, coming out with directives on how to do it, and then the audit that was called for Orange County.
Sure.
You're paying by law.
So when we receive petitions, we have like in big batches in the office, and we give them to our staff to kind of go through the process and check all the information, make sure they're registered to vote, and then we get a directive from the Secretary of State's office saying, actually, you need to go back and invalidate them if they did this. And that happened several times that we had to invalidate previously validated petitions, and it was very lengthy. We had to hire additional seasonal staff. We had to pay overtime. Our staff, they wore out. They were doing 12-hour days, working the weekends, and then we'd get another directive saying, wait, what you just did, go back and do it again, but do it this way. And then there's the cost of the petition processing to our office as well that has increased because of all the additional work. So it is daunting, and so there's a cost to our staff and in monetary means, but it's not going to be easy unless there is someone who's well funded. So.
Okay, let's move on to the hottest topic right now. Karen, we'll let you start with the discussion about where we're at with the mid-decade congressional redistricting task. What are your deadlines and what could impact them?
Well, we have, and I have to be careful about this because there is litigation, and I have my general counsel here in front of me to weigh me in. Thank you, Dick. But there are significant operational challenges for election administrators for this. One is we weren't expecting this right before an election, so it hasn't been budgeted for, and we are in the process of preparing for elections, which there are a series of steps we have to go through, and I've had to kind of redirect our resources to stop doing that, and let's focus on these new maps, and we have to align our precincts to the new congressional districts, and it's going to affect 300,000 Orange County voters. And it will cost our office, we estimate, about $400,000 that wasn't budgeted, so our commissioners in the room, we may have to come before you for a supplemental request. But there are strict deadlines that we must meet in order to meet candidate qualifying. So we're going to be going to the county commission for approval June 2nd. They have to approve it, and then we print the ballots. And then we're also told that, wait, there is a lawsuit, or there's a hearing on Friday, there might be an injunction, and I've also been told, hold on to your old maps. And so we're in a precarious situation because there is no undo button for the old maps. We would have to unravel everything again. So we're following the law as it is presented, and it is difficult, but we are doing our best. We will make sure there is an election, and we are ready to go when time comes.
That's the one thing you can't do. Just a little background. One of the things that's challenging too is the fact that a precinct cannot be split by a congressional district. And you know, the part that we talk about getting the voters ready, you know, and I know it's not off the top of your head, but how many voters have been hit twice? They got their BCC redistricting and new ID card, and now very shortly you're going to send them another ID card. Why do you keep sending me all these things?
Someone asked me, what does the supervisor do? And I said, we send mail. So everyone was affected during the county commission redistricting. Everyone got new numbers, so everyone got that new voter information card. This time, the 300,000 will be affected. They'll get those new cards. Some will have new congressional seats, some will have new congressional seats and new precincts and new polling places. So it's a challenge to educate everyone about those changes.
And if you moved and you didn't update your address, that's
Don't do that.
Don't
move.
And just in lighthearted conversation, I did say to Karen that maybe we should have invited her sister, Congresswoman Kathy Castor. She could really take up the whole program on her thoughts, I'm sure. All righty. So we did speak briefly about House Bill 991, which again, for clarity, the majority of it does not go into effect until January, and there are other lawsuits. So we've asked Karen just in what she can cover, that's why her attorney's here to watch, because we don't want her having to do depots, in the sense of what will it look like for Orange County voters in your office?
Well, first, it's in January. Again, this is not during the midterms. There'll be new ID requirements. No student IDs will be allowed for voting, and no retirement center IDs will be acceptable either. So get your driver's license, get your Florida ID. The biggest thing would be, like Aubrey mentioned, it's a citizenship check. It's Florida's version of the SAVE Act, and so voters can still register to vote the way they normally do, and then our office does the citizenship verification on the back end, and that requires, where it used to be data entry, now it requires a lot of records research, and we will contact the Division of Motor Vehicles to see if you have a birth certificate on record there. And then if your name has changed, we'll look and see if there is a marriage record or a divorce record. So there's going to be a lot of information that we have to look up. It'll be a cost to our office again. It will be confusing, but and there's also a legal challenge. So we're going to wait for that whole legal challenge to go through its process. We'll have to wait for rulemaking from the Division of Elections and for clarity on exactly what it will take. But that will be a large part of our workload come January.
No downtime in the elections office. All right, Aubrey, we go back to this mid-decade and some of the rulings here. What do you think the future holds for the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and Fair Districts amendments, and what do you see likely to happen?
Well, people often ask me if I'm related to the Jew orthopedic clinic, and I tell them, no, I'm a doctor of democracy. So in this case, unfortunately, my diagnosis is that they're both on life support. They're still here. The U.S. Supreme Court made it clear that they were not overturning the Voting Rights Act, even though the critics on the court of the minority pointed out, well, you're maybe not overruling it completely, you're just gutting it so that it can't be enforced, but you're still leaving it there. But it is there. And with fair districts amendments, same thing. We don't know what's going to happen. We've got lawsuits going right now. Briefly going back in time just a little bit for the Voting Rights Act. You know, when it passed in 1965, it was to protect Voting Rights Act, primarily minority groups, in particular, racial minority groups, and particularly African Americans. And then it was amended over the years. It expanded to include language minorities. And also in the 80s, they realized that it was difficult. The original version said that you have to prove intent of a state or local government to that they're trying on purpose to hurt a racial minority group or language minority group's ability to participate. But they realized that that was going to be, or by practical experience, they realized that was very difficult. So they actually said, look, if you have the result, if what you do results in discriminatory behavior, then that's illegal as well. And so then by the 90s, you saw minority representation go up dramatically, including here in Florida. I was just about to start teaching. Well, I started teaching in 95, so just in 92, though, we elected 3 African Americans to Congress from Florida for the first time. But since then, that was sort of the high water mark as we got into the 1990s and 2000s in terms of proactively trying to ensure that racial and language and ethnic minorities had a fair opportunity to participate and to elect representatives of their choosing. The U.S. Supreme Court sort of struck the first blow at the Voting Rights Act when they took away the pre-clearance provision under the original Voting Rights Act. A number of southern states, including Florida, whenever they were going to make changes to their elections, for instance, drawing new maps, it would have to go to the Justice Department for pre-clearance. So you didn't even have to file a lawsuit. It automatically went there because of their history of racially discriminatory practices. But the U.S. Supreme Court threw that out, said the formula that the Congress was using was old and outdated, and that if they wanted to come up with a new one, they could, but other than that, they weren't going to use it. So we haven't had pre-clearance in a while. And then most recently, of course, in the Calais versus Louisiana decision, it came down to whether or not Louisiana needed to draw a second African American district to more equally represent the proportion of African Americans in the population in Louisiana. And the U.S. Supreme Court not only struck it down, they could have been pretty narrow and just struck it down and said, actually the Civil Rights Act specifically says it doesn't have to be proportional. But instead, they did a very big, sort of wide-arching decision that said, you cannot take race into account at all because that violates the 14th Amendment. And we're going back to, you have to prove intent. Again, we're not getting rid of the Voting Rights Act, but in order to enforce it, you have to prove somebody has intent. And by the way, if they say that they are gerrymandering for partisan reasons, and it just happens to affect African Americans or Hispanics, that's perfectly legal now. So, yeah, right now, Doctor of Democracy says life support.
But just to build on that just a little bit, we'll stay with you, Aubrey. In 2018 opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts pointed to the Fair District Amendments as a positive example of how states can address gerrymandering without getting the U.S. Supreme Court or Congress involved. Well, that was 8 years ago. What do you think about the gerrymandering arms race that's going on now?
Well, that gerrymandering arms race was launched in part by the U.S. Supreme Court, who for a while, there was some 5-4 decisions that looked like maybe this U.S. Supreme Court was going to say that extreme partisan gerrymandering might be unconstitutional. That maybe it was unconstitutional because it was going to allow voters to be treated differently. But they never ever quite got there, and now with the new majority, they've gone completely the other direction and basically have given they're not saying that they think it's great that we have partisan gerrymandering, but they basically have said, well, it's not our job to determine whether something's good or bad for democracy. We're just supposed to evaluate it whether it's constitutional or not. And particularly for the 6 justices in the majority who are aligned with the Federalist Society, and they say, well, we're going to look back at the like at the founding and through the early part, and hey, gerrymandering actually happened in the early 1800s. It's named after a Massachusetts governor, right? So clearly it's been around all this time. That's, sort of the bad news. As they said, at the federal level, they can't stop it. But they did say, as Bill's question went into, they did say that states could stop political gerrymandering, partisan gerrymandering, if they wanted. And they did point to Florida's Fair Districts Amendment as one of the ways that states could legally do that. So they have actually upheld that. I mean, I would say they've upheld the amendment, but they did actually point to that as a positive example of how states could stop it if they wanted. Of course, what we have seen now after President Trump has requested this midterm redistricting is that we've seen a flood of Republican states start doing it, and then in response, a flood of Democratic states, or at least, I won't say a flood because there's not as many of them, but then some Democratic states trying to do it as well. And so that's where we're at right now, is this, as you said, I think aptly said, it's an arms race right now.
Right. All right, real quickly, this is just a simple one that I think is, do you think, and we'll go Aubrey, do you think the Florida Supreme Court, even though we've heard there's a hearing this Friday in the lower court, will they overturn these new mid-decade congressional redistricting maps?
Probably not.
And why not?
Who knows for sure, but I'd put it like apparently you can't do political betting at the Seminole tribe, but there are these predictive markets that you can do, bets. So like I'm not really a betting person, but if I was going to bet, I would put money, it's not because I personally want it to be this way, it's just because I think politically and factually it's probably the way it's going to be. If I had to bet, I would say that the Florida Supreme Court will allow these newly drawn maps to be used. Part of it is the obvious. Governor DeSantis has appointed 6 out of the 7 members there. They are Republican conservative, Federalist Society aligning justices. They, for the most part, over the last 7 years, have given Governor DeSantis mostly what he wants. Handful of times they've voted against his wishes. Once when he tried to appoint Renata Francis to the Supreme Court, and she had less than 10 years in the Florida bar. And so they said, no, you can't do that. Now, eventually he got her on later when she had been there, but they did stand up then. And I will say the 2 constitutional amendments that I just mentioned a little earlier, the Abortion Rights Amendment and the recreational marijuana amendments, it was a 4-3 split, but they did allow those to go forward. So that's why I don't think it's 100% sure that they're going to reject these amendments, but that they're going to reject these lawsuits and allow it to go forward. But I do think there's a pretty high probability that they will. And they could do it in several different ways. They could just say, they could just summarily say, they could say, look, we're going to let this play out in the lower courts, and that's going to take a while. So until that's decided, the maps are in effect. As you said, that's the legal thing they've given you, so that's what will be used for this election. So that would be one way. The scarier thing they might do, either quickly or eventually, is declare the entirety of the Fair Districts Amendments unconstitutional by saying that because the U.S. Supreme Court has struck down some of those voting rights language, and some of that language is actually in Fair Districts Amendment, that you can't separate any of it. So since a little bit of it is now unconstitutional, we're going to toss out the whole thing. That's a possibility as well.
So as we know, the Florida Legislature is in a special session that started yesterday because they couldn't get their number 1 task, a budget pass. And so they're up there for an extended period of time. Reminds me of a saying I used to have when I was supervisor. I said, no man, woman, or child or dog are safe when the Florida Legislature is in session. Okay, Aubrey, it's back to you, but if anybody's got any input here, what do you think about the governor and the legislature are going to do about property tax? Will they call a special session for this summer? And then probably we'll throw it over to Karen and say, well, what will that do to your ballot building?
If I had to guess, if I had to predict, I would say yes. We are going to see at least one, maybe a handful of proposals to either cut or eliminate property taxes for homeowners or for people who claim the homestead exemption. I don't think it will be designed so that it exempts schools, most likely, everything we've seen. We don't know for sure because Governor DeSantis has sort of pushed this, but as the Speaker of the House, Daniel Perez, has pointed out numerous times over the last 6 months, the governor, as of today, has never yet come out with a specific program about what he would want to do, whereas the House looked at about 8 or 10 different things, actually, and even passed a handful. The Senate didn't take it up. What specifically might pass, and I think probably two things possibly. One, a total repeal over time. I don't think they'll just say starting next year that it'll be a repeal, but I think that they will maybe put something on there that says over a period of 5 years, 10 years or whatever, they will reduce it so that it is eliminated. Or the other thing I think that may be on there is a big increase in the homestead exemption itself. So rather than eliminating property taxes, they would just say, okay, right now there's potentially about $50,000 as a homestead exemption, right? It's not quite that straightforward, but more or less it's about $50,000 homestead exemption. So maybe they up that a lot and link it to inflation. So they say, okay, over time we're going to increase it to 100,000, 200,000, 300, maybe up to 500,000, so that not everybody's property taxes will be eliminated, but maybe for median-priced homes and lower, it would be eliminated. Again, I'm just speculating what I think might come out. I don't know for sure, but that's what I would guess. And I definitely am almost 100% sure something will be on the ballot.
Oh, Karen?
So, Bill, as you know, our office is a very lean operation. There are not a lot of corners to cut, but our office is funded by the county commission. So I think it's important that people understand the consequences of those tax cuts and what services will be cut. And the county is already experiencing so many challenges and disparate needs that it's already difficult for their decision making. But we will carry on. Elections will still happen.
That's it. And I mean, the election, you get the primary election, 7 days later it has to be certified, and then you got to get ballots to the press with that. So, I mean, the window is shutting very quickly in terms of what you have to do. They don't care. All right, Ricardo, we kind of left you out of here at the end. You got some final thoughts on this election, what people need to know real quick? 1 minute? The timekeeper's looking at me like, uh-oh.
So, we host these spaces and we share very dire information. That's not to, hopefully it's not scaring you from actually go voting, but to the contrary, it's to arm you with the right information about what's happening so that you can then go out and be, a trusted voice for your networks. Voting, regardless of everything we've been talking about right now, voting is actually meant to be joyful. It's your power. And you might look at it as an act of resistance. Your actual act of going to vote is an act of resistance to counter all of these attempts that are making voting less accessible. So use your power, go out, and vote before Election Day.
All right, our last question is for you, the audience. But first, a little history. Katherine Harris was the last elected Secretary of State of Florida. All others have been appointed by the sitting governor since 2002. How many of you agree with me that elections should run more smoothly in Florida, or would run more smoothly in Florida, if the voters elected the Secretary of State? If you're in favor of it, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Up, 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 up. Yeah, how many of you would sign a petition to make that happen? Hey, League, please, please, do it. You heard it right here on that.
And Bill will run for Secretary of State.
No, and she knows. Somebody asked if Jerry Demings gets elected, do I be the lieutenant governor? I said no. He can pick somebody else. But I'd wait for the appointed Secretary of State. And of course, it has to get to the ballot, remember, so it's not going to happen tomorrow, okay, on that. All right, well, let's give a hand to our panel members. Okay. At this time, we're going to open the forum to League members to ask question, and Gina Hall is in her position at the mic to my left to help you with your again, they're questions, just questions, okay? And please raise your hand if you need a mic because you can't get to the podium, to this mic there. After Q&A, remain seated because the League does have announcements to make.
Thank you, Bill. Again, if you have a question, please come up. One question, and I'm going to hold on to the mic because, you know, I love holding on to the mic. So first question.
Hi. I have a question about the requirements for the voter ID. I always assumed that it was up to the voter to provide those documents. Is it statutory that the supervisor try to do that? Or is it, I'm sure it'd be helpful if the voter could provide those.
Can you clarify the voter ID documents and who printing them?
Like if a woman changed her name in marriage, marriage license, divorce decree, things like that. You had mentioned that the office would do the searching.
Yes, and we search in the databases like the driver's license office where they have some of those documents. They don't have them all, so we don't have access to
it'd be
passport
limited
records.
then, so it really is still up to the voter to actually produce those docs.
Yes, I mean, and they would be the ones who produce it for the Division of Motor Vehicles, so yes.
And the offices across the state are going to be very dependent on lots of other state and federal agencies to have their databases up to date for them.
Teresa?
Is a solution to voting registration something that we can look at as the mail-in as a safety measure for those that are scared of going to the polls?
I think that is a great option that we can benefit from. It is the safest way to vote is at home in your pajamas.
And then just remember to mail it or deliver it to
your
the
signature.
SOE office.
And to
Sign it and
Sign
look
it.
at your look at your driver's license signature and make it sure it matches so that it's accepted.
So my question is, what other kinds of voter suppression do you see going on in Florida, or attempts to game the system, perhaps in ways that are technically legal? For example, what comes to mind is a lot of judges resigning and then elections getting canceled. Is there anything, what other threats to voter suppression are there, and what can we do about it?
I'm punting the answer to that one.
Well, we spoke here about some of them. I mean, obviously, this redistricting falls in that voter suppression status. We talked about the vote by mails and all. Again, it's going to be putting representatives up there who are going to pass legislation that you, the voters, want.
And I mean, the attacks on third-party voter registrations are quite literally voter suppression. If you look at the state database of how many third-party voter registrations are registered today on an election year, there's only 103. Back in 2024, there were hundreds. of organizations and individuals that were registered with the state to go out and do voter registration. Today, there's 103.
And could I just do a quick follow-up to one thing that was mentioned was the appointment of judges, which is, I've gotten a number of calls from the media about that in the last couple months. As most of you all know, our trial judges at the county and circuit level officially are selected through non-partisan election. But the Florida Constitution also says if there is a vacancy in between terms that the governor gets to make an appointment. And so normally that is considered to be a good thing. Most of the judiciary was behind this when they put this in the Constitution because they said, you know, we don't want to be without a judge for like a year or two and not have enough cases heard and these kinds of things. But what we've seen in a number of cases is sort of pushing the limits to the law. Like there was a recent case where a judge was retiring and the term would have ended like on January 5th, say. And so he announced that he was going to retire and all that. But then he sent a letter to like the court administrator saying, okay, I'm going to step down on December 31st for administrative reasons, tax, or whatever. Well, then the governor's office got wind of that and they said, well, we're canceling the election that would have been held in August and the person would have taken it. And instead, we're going to make the appointment. And that allows them, under Florida Constitution, the interim appointment gets to serve at least 1 full year until the next regularly scheduled election. So if it happens right after an election, somebody could serve like well over two years. So instead of being elected, then they are appointed by the governor. So that is sort of an interesting dodge.
Why did the Fair District Amendment that we all passed, why did that not stop this latest redistricting? I know we've redistricted twice now since we've passed that amendment. I don't understand why that's been allowed.
Well, it's the governor's position that, well, here's what we started with first. Initially, when President Trump asked all the Republican-governed states to do midterm redistricting, some of them jumped right into it, like Texas and some others. Florida sort of hedged a little because we do have the Fair Districts Amendment. And so you heard the governor say things like, well, you know, we need to redistrict because our population growth was so much these first few years, or we need to redistrict because we were cheated of representation last time in 2020 and we should have gotten an extra member. Or he was saying, you know, predicting how they would rule in the Calais versus Louisiana decision. But thankfully, he's been nice enough, and his aide that drew the maps have been nice enough just to lay it more clearly on the table, because under oath, the aide that drew the map has said that he took partisan data into account when he did this. And of course, you're probably all aware also that the first time anybody saw these maps was on Fox News in a red and blue color provided by the governor's office, even before he sent it to the legislature. And so what they argued in the letter that they sent to the legislature was that fair districts didn't have to be followed at all. That because the U.S. Supreme Court had already sort of indicated that they were going to say you can't take race into account when you draw district lines, and now since subsequently have, you know, actually ruled that way, since that is part of the Fair Districts Amendment, right? It says that you can't draw lines with the intent of favoring or disfavoring a party or an incumbent, but it also says that you have to draw lines to make sure that minorities can elect representatives of their choosing. And so that's basically the governor and his team is arguing that because one small part of the Fair Districts Amendment is now legally questionable, that they should be able to just eliminate the entire thing. So that's what they're saying.
And that's what the lawsuit, is that the basis of the lawsuit that's been filed? Do you know?
Well, I think the lawsuits are basically just staking the straightforward position that fair districts, no matter what the governor and his team say, the Fair Districts Amendment is in the Florida Constitution and is legally enforceable. And they have clearly drawn these maps with partisan intent. It's not even an argument anymore. I mean, that's like, you just, I don't know the legal term for it, but it's like a facts. Yeah, there you go. That's a good way of saying it. Saying the quiet part out loud. So, yeah.
While I have absolute confidence in the integrity of the Orange County Elections Office, how can voters be assured that even once they get to count their votes, cast their votes, it will be counted accurately, and the results will not be changed.
Well, I appreciate your faith in our office, and I am a part of an association of all the Florida supervisors of elections, and the majority of them are Republican, and I couldn't find a finer bunch. So I am assured, I feel confident that they will count the votes as they are cast.
Okay, last question.
Thank you, everybody, for a really informative program. But as a longtime poll worker, and I know there are lots of us here in the room today, I really want to thank Karen and Bill before you for making our job so manageable and doable. And I would like to invite anybody who questions the validity of elections to be a poll worker, because once you've done it, you understand that it's a really good system supported by a really good supervisor of election system.
So real quickly, everybody that's been part of the Adopt a Precinct for the League of Women Voters, raise your hand. Yeah, look at that.
Yay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And interestingly enough, Karen, when COVID hit, the league told me they weren't going to be able to maybe even have one board, and that year they had 6 boards. Tremendous job, biggest supporter of the program. You were going to say something, Karen? Or Aubrey?
Thank you.
I wanted to real quick ask myself a question and answer it.
Okay.
Aubrey, should the Florida Supreme Court overrule and take out the Fair Districts Amendment? No, they should not. And here's just a couple, rundowns of why they shouldn't. One, I mean, it was put into the Constitution by the people. More than 60% of Floridians voted for it. And the main part of it was always about gerrymandering, partisan and incumbent gerrymandering. For most voters, I remember the ads that were run about fox guarding the hen house and some other. This is what it was all about. The second thing is this thought that just because some of the Voting Rights Act is now being interpreted a different way, we should get rid of the Florida Constitutional Amendment doesn't make much sense to me, because the U.S. Supreme Court, remember I said it was on life support, it wasn't gone. The U.S. Supreme Court, the majority specifically said we are not taking out the Voting Rights Act. It's still in existence. It's just it has to be interpreted a little bit differently. Well, the language is almost identical in the Fair Districts Amendment to what's in the Voting Rights Act. So if the U.S. Supreme Court said, hey, just because we've ruled one part of this Voting Rights Act that it has to be interpreted differently, doesn't mean the whole thing is going away. And then, lastly, we can also look at other constitutional amendments in Florida. Let's take the 8 is Enough initiative petition that was signed and passed some years back. It initially also tried to impose congressional term limits on Florida's congressional representatives. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court eventually ruled that you cannot impose term limits on congressional members because their qualifications are set in the U.S. Constitution, and so only a change of the U.S. Constitution could do it. But guess what? They didn't throw out all the term limits in Florida that are in that section. They just said, okay, you're not allowed to put term limits on the congressional people, but you can still have them on the governor, the cabinet, the state representatives, the state senators. So for a variety of reasons, I don't think they should do it, even if, unfortunately, I think they might.
All right, Ricardo, did you have something real quick?
Yes, something real quick on the line of making sure your vote is counted. Across the state for the past 4 years, we've trained dozens and dozens of league members, like yourselves, who are going out to the proceedings where the votes are counted, where the equipment is tested, where the votes are counted, where the election is certified, where the election is audited. So be on the lookout for those opportunities, because that's where you can actually be there in the room seeing when all of that is happening.
All right, Karen?
Yes, and I want to extend my gratitude to not just the people who work elections, but people on the front end in this audience who also do all the voter registration and go to the high schools and all the community events to register people. Thank you.
All right. And now your co-president is going to come up and give a few other announcements.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. if you'd like to return to your seats, thank you so very much to Bill and to the entire panel. So we actually left an extra moment for announcements today because I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot going on. So in addition to all the things we always ask you to do, we have a couple special asks today. You may remember, if you were here at our March Hot Topics, that there was a call to action from our panelists to speak up for full court funding and restoring the funding for the Victims of Crimes Act. They asked us to advocate for that, and we responded. A petition has been created by the League, and we are now collecting signatures. You'll find the QR code on your table on this flyer. Please add your name if you haven't had a chance, and please share it with your friends because anyone can sign. So please do that. The regular Florida legislative session ended without a budget, and now they have reconvened, and we just want to be sure that you understand that it's not just a budget, because the budget implications impact policy. So please pay attention to what is happening over the next 3 weeks, and also continue to pay attention to what did happen during session and the lawsuits that it triggered, including those filed by our state league. There is a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding, and as a league, what we can do, if we do nothing else, what we can do is help stop that misinformation. So, a couple things that we want you to do. So, first of all, so we're going to do this in the form of a quiz. So, vote by mail is down dramatically. People don't realize that all the requests expired. So who should go to the Supervisor of Elections office and check both their voter registration status and their mail-in ballot registration? Who should do that? Thank you. And who should you tell to do that? Thank you. Okay. Pay attention to the redistricting. That has been well discussed and still potentially can change. Pay attention. There's a lot of confusion. People can, again, go to the supervisor's office, and as the election approaches, they can go to our league, vote411.org, and that will tell them exactly who is on the ballot. So make sure that you know who is running to represent you as all the lines are shifting. And as has been mentioned, the new voter ID laws have been passed. When do they take effect? January. Do they affect the midterms? Many, many people are very confused about this. It is your job to tell everybody you know. All right, so now we are going to have a word from one of our voter services chairs, Saudi Ellis.
Thank you. In the past year, we've witnessed the systematic dismantling of democratic processes. And without active participation, we'll lose it. So if you believe in democracy, stand up and be a warrior for it, starting today. Make your plan to vote and have a backup plan. Democracy works when we all vote. Canvass. Go out and talk to people and listen to what they're saying. Phone or text bank. This is a great group activity to host. We know we like to party. Literature drops. If you don't want to talk to people, leave door hangers with useful information. Know who your representatives are. Write, email, call, or text them regularly. Educate yourself by knowing what the issues are in your community, attend your local government meetings in person or watch virtually. Vote and tell your friends and family to vote. Run for office. Can I just ask all of our elected officials who are league members to please stand? You're an inspiration to us all. Become a poll worker. Volunteer as a poll monitor and observe and report election issues. Arrange a carpool to the polls for early voting or election day. And most of all, be a vote multiplier. Share what you know. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And there is a handy, all the information kind of sheet on your table, so take a look at that. And now, this is your reminder to look at this flyer, which is on your tables, and it is your invitation to participate in our May/summer match campaign. Now we have some upcoming events. So first of all, our birthday is on Friday. We will be 87 years old, the League of Women Voters of Orange County. That's a long time of doing the things we do. Take a look at this card that's on your table. You can scan it to see our just completed annual report. It's a great way to really understand the activity and impact of this league over the last year. And it wasn't an election year. So get ready, but read that. We invite you to come on a Saturday night, stand tall. The Ramsey's Suffrage Cantata will be at the Pew Theater, and we have a discount for those that you can get through the newsletter, and we will be tabling because suffrage, it's kind of our thing. All right. Then we have a couple more. This Sunday, there will be a vigil for immigrant justice. Those happen every first and third Sunday of every month. First and third Sunday of every month at 4 o'clock, usually at Orlando City Hall, occasionally at Lake Eola. They're led by people of different faith traditions, and I'm just going to say I have the honor of leading this Sunday. So if you'd like to come, I would love to see you there, Sunday the 17th. And please take a look, too, at this flyer for No More Empty Rooms, community screening and panel discussion. The topic is dealing with the pain experienced by those who have lost loved ones to gun violence. A very difficult but important conversation. If you would like more information on how to get involved, there is a Hot Topics overtime today. It will run from 1:10 to 2 p.m. It's upstairs in the meeting room, which is here in this building. The stairs and elevator are just on the other side of this wall. I recommend the elevator. The stairs are deceivingly long. Ricardo will be there to talk about the important work that All Voting is Local does, and also Gina Hall, our other voter services chair, will be there to answer questions about how to get more involved. And then, in June, we have Hot Topics on June 10th. It is Orange County Judge Candidates Forum. Lastly, please complete our event survey. We are listening, we see you, and we've made changes, including some of the changes that we are continuing to evolve in our AV here, and we value your feedback. So please, please, thank you for being here today, and we'll see you next month. We are adjourned.